Okay, CR, are you there? CR, class CR, are you present at the moment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, please mute yourself. Okay, CR, can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, I will start the lecture maybe in 5 minutes because attendees are 25 only at the moment. So let me wait another 2 minutes. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let me start the lecture. Okay, before starting the lecture, let me tell you that I have already shared the introduction lecture on MS Teams. So you can download from here. So I have uploaded on MS Teams introduction. So I will also share the video recorded lecture of introduction related with introduction lecture. So you can read this slide yourself and also you can watch the videos. I don't want to take too much time to spend on this introduction lecture. So CR, can you see where the slides are uploaded? Last CR.
Yes, sir.
So please also I will also upload the lecture, today's lecture also after this class. So what introduction lecture comprises of, I will just show you quickly. So I believe that you have already covered the introduction with Dr. Qasim too. So in this introductory slides, so there is an introduction of the class instructors, reference books, course contents with tentative weeks designated to cover each topic, and assessment policy or assessment method that depends upon maybe the university policy. Maybe you will have quiz one with the mid exam and quiz two with final exam. But usually I used to take separate. I used to take the first quiz in the 6th week, not with the midterm or anthem exam. Then there is a course policy. You can read it carefully. And regarding the grades, so student they may add or drop the course within 2 weeks from the start of semester. So student may apply for W grade during the first 6 weeks. So actually, the student they cannot request me WF grade or I grade at the end of this subject. I do not award any WF or I grade. So then there are CLOs. You can read it yourself. CLO, lab part, theory parts, labs, and then there is a tentative lecture delivery plan, and then there is a definition of structural mechanics. So today we are going to start our very first topic, and the name of the topic is unsymmetrical bending. But before this topic, let me give you the definition or explain the definition of structural mechanics. Actually, what is structural mechanics? Actually, the mechanism, the word mechanics comes from the mechanism, and mechanism mean that the procedure, the method, and the pattern that we are following to solve certain problem, and the problem which are related with the structure. So actually, we want to study the mechanism of applied forces on any structural member. So then the point arises that why we want to study the effect of applied force on any structural member or structure. Actually, this previously the name of this subject was strength of material 2, and the subject that you have already studied in your third semester, mechanics of materials, its name was strength of material 1. So you can say that the structural mechanics is the advanced level course of uh, mechanics of material, or it is the mechanics of material part 2. So then what is the difference between the mechanics of material and what within the structural mechanics, between the structural mechanics? So actually, first of all, I need to explain what is the definition of mechanics. So mechanics, actually this is the branch of physics, or you can say that actually this is a branch of mathematics actually, where we study the effect of applied forces on any body. So if we want to study the effect of applied force on a body, then it is called the mechanics. And what mechanics, what method, what procedure we are adopting to study the effect of applied force is called mechanics. Actually, we need to follow certain rules, certain laws. For example, whether we want to use the Newton's first law, third law, or second law, or whether we want to use the mass into acceleration law, force law. So it means that whether we need to use the statics formula or the dynamic formula, so what formula will be applicable in what case, or what mechanism we need to follow to evaluate the effect of applied forces. So when we want to study the effect of applied forces on any body, it means that if we are applying the force on a body, then how the response is created. So if the type of the body is changed, then the branch of mechanics changes. If the body is rigid, rigid means that there is no any appreciable or significant deformation in a body when it is subjected to applied forces, then this is called rigid body mechanics. So rigid body mechanics, another name is statics. So statics is the branch of mechanics where we want to study the effect of applied force on a rigid body. So in rigid body, actually we use the Newton third law. So by using the Newton third law, the reaction will be equal to the action. So whatever is the applied force, the same reaction will be produced in a body. But if we want to consider the body as a deformable body, then this branch is called strength of materials or mechanics of materials. So actually in this case, we want to study the effect of applied force, and also we want to compute the deformation within the body when this body is subjected to forces. So what is the strain produced in the body? What are the deformation? What is the extension or contraction? Just like you have used the deflection formula in mechanics of material. So these deflection formula are used only for the deformable body or by using the laws of strength of material. So it means that what mechanism you need to adopt, we need to use the Hooke's law. Maybe we need to use the strain law. Change in length is divided by original length is equal to the strain. So these laws are applicable for the deformable body, or we want to use this mechanism. And also, if we want to determine the reaction, so we consider the body as rigid and we determine the maximum possible reaction. So similarly, if the body changes from solid to fluid, then the branch is called mechanics, fluid mechanics. But actually, what is the major difference between mechanics of materials and structural mechanics? Actually, in structural mechanics, we studied the simple cases. Simple cases mean that we investigated the effect of normal forces only on a body. This means that if a body is subjected to only compression or tensile forces, then how we can study the deformation, how we can compute the strain value, and how we can compute the normal stresses. And then we study the example of a beam. where a line element was subjected to the transversal loading only transversal loading. So in that case, we learned that and what type of internal forces are produced. So when a line element is subjected to transversal forces, it is called as a beam. So in a beam, there are two internal forces produced. One is the shear, other is bending moment. So due to this bending moment and shear force, then we studied how we can compute the maximum flexure stresses and maximum shear stresses. Then we studied of the twist. So actually in all these examples, we studied all type of the forces separately. So this was a simple forces. When an element was subjected to simple forces, in that case, the maximum effect, it was computed by using simple formula. But if the example of beam, it is they cannot predict the maximum stress value uh, with the same precision or accuracy. So how we can deal this problem? So we will study in this structural mechanics. Actually, in structural mechanics, what we're supposed to do, we want to study the effect of complex forces or applied forces on any structure or structural element. So actually, what type of the effect we want to determine? So effect may be what is the maximum stress produced in that element, what is the maximum deflection produced, and what are the maximum strain value produced in any structural member. So structure mechanics or mechanics of structure is the computation of deformation, deflection, and internal forces or stresses, which are sometimes also called stress equivalent within structure. So either for design or for performance evaluation of existing structure. So again, the basic concept is the same. We want to study the or evaluate or compute the effect of applied forces. If some forces are acting on any structure member, then what response or what effect produced in that structural member. So what type of the effect we are interested in? So we may be interested in to compute maximum internal forces or internal stress value, maximum deflection or maximum strains or deformation. So why we want to compute? Due to two reasons, either for design or for performance evaluation. For design, you have already studied steel structure design. So in steel structure design, when you want to design the beam, so you analyze the structure for a beam and you compute what is the maximum bending moment produced. So why you want to compute maximum bending moment? Because you want to design or you want to select a section, steel section in such a way that it can resist this bending moment safely. And then you compute the maximum deflection produced in that beam due to the applied load. Why? Because you want to compare this with the code allowed or maximum permissible deflection. So that you can control the deflection. So deflection should be less than allowable limits. So for a better design. And second is for a performance evaluation of existing structure. Performance evaluation means that, for example, a bridge is already constructed. So in a bridge, maybe they have used a plate girder. Maybe you also, I believe, that got the question of know the dimension. You can go to the field. You can take the dimension. If you know the dimension of the plate girder, you know the material properties. Then what you can do, you can compare the moment carrying capacity, and then this moment carrying capacity can be compared with the design load. So if the moment carrying capacity is more than design load, then beam is this plate girder is safe to use. And there is another reason we need to evaluate the structure. For example, we have constructed a beam, RCC beam, reinforced concrete beam, and just after construction, maybe sometime, the cracks appear. So actually, you may evaluate the reason actually why these cracks are appear and whether these cracks are due to the tensile stresses, due to the compressive stresses, or due to shear stresses. So you can evaluate the reason and you can point out or determine the deficiency in the design. But actually, in order to evaluate the performance or in order to evaluate the effect of applied forces, we need some input data. And what input data we require? We know the span of the beam, what are the boundary conditions, what type of the load it is subjected to, and what are the geometric properties. Because from geometric properties, we can compute the moment of inertia, section modulus, and cross-section area. And from the end condition, because, for example, if a beam is subjected to UDL load, so the maximum bending moment produced is the function of end condition. So in a simply supported beam, the moment is omega L square by 8. But if the end conditions are fixed, then the moment is reduced to omega L square by 12. And we must know the material properties also. What are the strength of material, Fy, Fu value for the steel, or if for the concrete, what is the concrete tensile strength and compressive strength. So output quantity. So what we are interested in to compute, we are interested to compute the force reaction, internal stresses, what the maximum deflection, strains, or displacement produced. Actually, there are only three types of the strength associated with any material. Number one is compressive, tensile, and shear. So in case of the beam, so all three types of these stresses will produce because a beam is subjected to shear forces and bending moment. The shear forces produce the shear stresses, and the bending moment produce both tensile stresses and compressive stresses in combination, because half of the beam will be in tension and half of the beam will be in compression. So for the case of concrete, tensile strength, compressive strength, and shear strength all are different. So we want to compute that at what point in the beam that there are maximum shear stresses, and at what place or at what point the maximum compressive and tensile stresses are produced. Because we want to compare these stresses with their limiting strength values. If the shear stresses approaches to the shear strength, they have exceeded the shear strength limit, then the beam will fail in shear and it will be safe in compression and tension. And in the same way, if the tensile stresses approaches to their threshold value or their limiting value, then a tensile crack or the tensile rupture will appear in the beam and the beam will be fail in shear and in compression. Similarly, if the compressive stresses they are more than the compressive strength of the material and it approaches to its compressive strength first, then the failure will be crushing failure or compressive failure. So after the completion of this course, actually you can predict, if you know the strength of the material and you know applied load, you can predict that whether before actually applying the load on the beam or before actually testing that beam, you can predict that whether this beam will fail in shear, compression, or tension, and what will be the location of the first crack or the failure zone. So actually, this you will study in this particular course. So I believe that you have already studied the stress transformation with Dr. Qasim. So in the stress transformation, actually what you're supposed to do, you want to determine the maximum stresses and the plane of maximum shear, and that's so that you can compare these maximum normal stresses and maximum shear stresses at any point against the material strength. so that you may predict that whether the failure may occur or not. So I will stop here. So I will share the link of video recorded lecture, and then you can have the overview of this introductory lecture again. So before starting the unsymmetrical bending for our very first topic, if someone is having any question, he can ask me by raising the hand. So you can raise the hand if anyone is having any question. Okay, now I want to ask the question. What is the structure? Anybody who knows the definition of structure can raise the hand. So Abdul Rafe, can you hear me, Abdul Rafe? Abdul Rafe. Okay, at the moment, all the students who are present, please raise the hand. The students who are present, all the students, please raise the hand. I want to check how many students at the moment. So Abdul Hanan, are you there? Abdul Hanan. So Abdul Hanan is not there. Abdul Rafe, Hassan Subhan, हसनैन अली. यार इनके रोल नंबर नोट करते जाओ, एक लहरा लिखते जाओ. एट दी एंड मैं आपसे तमाम रोल नंबर लूंगा इनके. मैं इनकी पिक्चर भी कैप्चर कर ली है मैंने. ये रोल नंबर लिखते जाओ. अब्दुल हनान साजिद, अब्दुल राफे, हसन सुबहान, हसनैन अली. मेरे ख्याल में सीएल खुद भी नहीं है.
नो सर.
अच्छा ठीक, इनके रोल नंबर लिखते जाओ, ठीक है ना?
यस सर, मैं नोट कर लिया.
ठीक, जहांगीर इशफाक, और ये है मुकनीन रहमान, उसामा अली, एंड रूहान, एंड उमर अरशद. ठीक है. ओके, प्लीज अनरेज. ठीक है, पता चल गया आपका. ठीक है, ओके जंगीर, मुझे पता चल गया आपका. ओके, प्लीज अनरेज दी हैंड. प्लीज अनरेज. AHM, what is? Okay, you don't have question, then let me start the recording and let me start the very first lecture.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, please 20528. Sir, still I'm not
okay,
added.
I got you. Okay, no problem. I got your message. Okay, now please unraise the hand now. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, dear students, inshallah we are going to start our very first topic, and the name of the topic is unsymmetrical bending. So what is the symmetrical bending and unsymmetrical bending? So we will discuss in detail. So before starting this topic, I would like to give you a very quick overview of this lecture formula. So in a simple bending, the flexure or the bending theory was restricted to loading lying in the plane that contains an axis of symmetry of the cross section. Actually, we will discuss this in detail. Actually, this formula is only applicable if the loads are acting, applied load are acting along the axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry means that this is only applicable for a section which is having at least one axis of symmetry, or load they are acting parallel to the axis of symmetry or passing to plane of symmetry or axis of symmetry. So if the load they are not passing through the plane of symmetry or axis of symmetry, then this formula cannot be used to compute the flexure stresses due to applied bending moment. So what is the reason, we shall discuss in detail. So in derivation, before derivation, we need to consider certain assumptions. So there could be many assumptions, but there are two important assumptions. Number one, plane cross section remains plane before and after the beam is subjected to bending. So I will explain this assumption in detail because this is very important assumption. And Hooke's law is applicable. Hooke's law is applicable means that this formula is only applicable within the proportional limit. Proportional limit means that we are supposed to use a constant E value. So this formula cannot predict the stress accurately above the proportional limit. So all the stresses in material must be less than equal to the proportional limit. Okay, let me explain the bending behavior. So, for example, we are having a beam, maybe a prismatic beam, or maybe it may have any cross section. So, when a bending moment is applied to a straight prismatic beam, the longitudinal lines become curved and vertical or transversal lines remain straight and yet undergo a rotation. So, just for the understanding, for the reference, we have sketched different longitudinal line and also transversal line. These are maybe any reference line just to understand the bending behavior. So you can say that each longitudinal line it represents the fiber along the length of the beam, and each vertical line or transversal line they can represent any particular cross section. For example, this cross section is here, and then at this point we are having this cross section. So this cross section is a plane before the beam is subjected to bending. When a plane means that this cross-sectional surface, it is a flat surface, so it is remains perfectly plane. Plane means that there is no any wavy action, no any undulation or warping. So when this beam is subjected to transversal loading or any bending moment, so this beam bends maybe either in the downward direction or upward direction. So after bending this longitudinal line, they undergo either extension or contraction. This means that they become curved. The longitudinal line they become curved. So when they are becoming curved, it means that the length is either increasing or the length is either decreasing. So one side there is an increase in the length, and on the other side the length of the longitudinal line decreases because they are adopting the curved path. So but what happened to the cross sectional line? Actually the cross sectional line they remain straight, but they rotate. They although they remain straight, but actually they rotate and rotate about the cross sectional x-axis. So actually the sign convention or the reference axis that we want to consider in this particular subject are the cross-sectional axis are x and y, and longitudinal axis we want to assume as a z-axis. So actually we want to make the reference axis inconsistent with our design. For example, in steel structure, we refer the cross-sectional properties as a x and y, and the longitudinal axis we assumed as a z-axis. So in different books, maybe in structural mechanics and structural analysis books, you will find that they are regarding the longitudinal axis as a x-axis and the cross-sectional axes are X, Z, and Y. But that will not make any difference in computation of stresses or the internal forces. But in this subject, we are regarding the longitudinal axis X and Y, and cross-sectional axis X and Y, and the longitudinal axis as a Z axis. So actually, when the beam is subjected to bending, maybe downward load, so the cross-sectional line or the vertical line, they remain unchanged. The length before and after the beam is subjected to bending remains same. But however, these lines or the cross-section, they rotate or twist about this cross-sectional x-axis. So even though after rotating, this surface will be remain flat. Remain flat means that this surface will be remain plane. So that is the assumption that plane cross section remain plane before and after the beam is subjected to bending. It means that after bending, the width of the cross section will be remain same and the depth will be remain same at any particular cross section. But only the length on the one side is increasing and on the other side is decreasing as the length is adopting the curved path. So it means that one side is the length is increasing and on the other side the length is decreasing. So along this depth, we may have one longitudinal length or longitudinal fiber, which is actually adopting the curved path, but its length is neither decreasing or nor increasing. And this length or the fiber within the member which is or the surface which is not increasing or decreasing in its length is regarded as a neutral surface. So a surface in a beam containing fibers that does not undergo any extension or contraction does not subjected to any tension or compression are regarded as a neutral surface. So a neutral surface is a two-dimensional surface. So it is having the fiber along the length and also along the cross section. So when the beam is subjected to bending, so these fibers, they are not subjected to any extension or contraction. So actually, if the length is increasing, so if the length of the fiber is increasing, it means that it is subjected to the tensile strain. So we are interested to determine change in length over original length. We can determine in on one side, and this tensile strain can be multiplied with modulus of elasticity to compute the tensile stresses. Similarly, if any fiber is subjected to contraction, then we want to determine what is the negative strain produced on any layer or at any surface, and then this strain can be multiplied with the modulus of elasticity to compute the compressive stresses by Hooke's law. So what is the neutral axis? The intersection of neutral surface with any cross section of the beam perpendicular to its longitudinal axis is called the neutral axis. So if we are cutting any cross section, for example, if I cut the cross section of this beam from here, so wherever this cross section is intersecting its neutral surface, then this will be regarded as a neutral axis. The neutral axis is with reference to cross section, but this is cross section is perpendicular to the neutral surface. So neutral axis is one-dimensional line. This is the axis with reference to any cross section when the cross section intersect with neutral surface. So this neutral axis actually it subdivided the cross section into two parts. So one side of the neutral axis is subjected to extension or tensile strain, and the other side is subjected to contraction or compressive strain, which is depending upon the type of the loading, whether the beam is bending upward or downward. So all fibers on one side of neutral axis are in state of tension and all the fibers on the other side will be in state of compression. Okay, now just like I have discussed here, that this formula is applicable if the load they are acting or passing through the plane of symmetry. Just to validate this thing, we need to quickly overview the derivation again. So let's suppose we are having a trapezoidal cross section. So this is the cross section which is having the centroidal axis, x-axis and y-axis, and out of these two axes, the y-axis is the axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry means that this axis is dividing this cross section into two halves. And one half is the mirror image of the other side. And the two axis is the one line and the cross section into two mirror image of portion to max loading. Maybe so it may be subjected to any type of load, but condition is that all loads they are to the plane of symmetry. So along this length, we are considering two cross sections. So along the length, for example, you can say that this is a beam which may be trapezoidal. We are considering two cross sections very close to each other. Maybe one cross section is this one, and other cross section is this one. We are considering two cross sections. So distance between these two cross sections is delta z, because the distance will be along z direction, just like z. So we want to consider two cross sections and both cross sections of delta z. And we are regarding this one cross section line or vertical line AFC and the second cross section line B and D. And distance between them is delta z. So when this beam is subjected to bending for this load F1, F2, F3, so if the load they are acting in y direction, so they will produce the moment about x-axis. Moment is always produced about the axis which is perpendicular to the loading. So moment is always perpendicular to the loading plane. So the resultant moment, total moment produced by forces F1, F2, F3 about x-axis at any particular cross section will be m. We can consider or delta m. So after when the beam is subjected to bending, so as we have discussed that this cross section actually if the beam is bending, so this bottom portion, bottom fiber or the longitudinal line, they will adopt the curved path. So to adopt the curved path, this vertical line or the cross-sectional line, they will rotate with reference to each other, just like they will rotate, and rotation will takes place about x-axis. So you can say that the cross-section AC, when the beam is subjected to load F1, F2, 3, has rotated to the new location or new position, which is named as A prime and C prime. Similarly, the cross-section B and D, after the beam is subjected to bending, they have adopted a new position because they have rotated, and the new position is regarded to B prime and D prime. So after rotation, d theta is the angle subtended by two planes after rotation. And we are considering actually 3 fibers along the cross section, maybe 3 longitudinal line, 1 longitudinal line or 1 fiber along the neutral axis, which may be regarded EF, 1 fiber below the neutral axis, maybe at outer surface or maybe at any distance y from the neutral axis. And another fiber we have considered at the same distance y, but on the top side of neutral axis. So d theta is the angle subtended by section A bar C bar and B bar D bar after rotation. And after rotation, we can say that the Ry is the radius of the neutral axis after the cross section, after the beam is subjected to bending. So that is the distance from the origin to the neutral axis, Ry, because radius is we are measuring in downward direction or y direction. And then we can say that y is the any variable distance or arbitrary distance between the outer fiber that we have considered to the neutral axis. And O is the origin of the circle whose part is this arc. Okay, actually now we want to compute the total strain produced or total extension produced which is on the bottom side of neutral axis. So we can assume that this d theta is so small that this curved path, the length c bar and d bar, that can be considered as a straight line. So we can determine that how much length of this bottom fiber is increased. So that can be measured by taking the final length minus initial length divided by original length. So final length is C prime D prime minus initial length CD is the total change in length divided by original length, which is C into D. So we are having this formula. This epsilon Z just indicate that the strain is produced in Z direction or along the length, because we have considered the fiber along the length. So strain is produced in Z direction. So we know that before the beam is subjected to bending, the length CD is equal to EF. So we can replace the distance CD with EF. Okay, now we can determine this length E and F by using the formula of a sector. To determine the arc length of a sector, we know this formula. The arc length of any sector is equal to the radius of that arc multiplied by the theta or angle subtended by that sector. So EF, we can say that that value it will be equal to, so we are considering this distance only r, so you can also write ry also if you want. So if we want to compute EF, so we know the radius is r, and if this r is multiplied with this d theta, that will be equal to EF. Similarly, the length C prime and D prime can be computed by using formula of sector. So angle between this plane and this radial line is the same d theta. But now the total distance from origin to this fiber is r plus this y. So C prime D prime distance will be equal to r plus y into d theta. So when we substitute the values in this equation, so from here, this r d theta will be cancelled with r d theta because that is having negative sign. So we will have y d theta over r d theta. So this d theta value will be cancelled out. So strain in the z direction, it is the function of y over r parameter. So y is the distance from neutral axis to the fiber under consideration, and r is the radius of neutral axis, radius of the neutral axis attained after bending. So we know the Hooke's law. So by Hooke's law, stress is equal to strain multiplied by modulus of elasticity. So if we substitute the values of epsilon z here, so the stress will be equal to Ey over R, or you can say that that is equal to sigma z over E and y over R. So that is our equation number 2. So that we have determined by using this compatibility equation. Now the second part of derivation. So I told you that after bending, so actually this strain is at the bottom fiber is subjected to tensile stresses, and that is section. The stress are acting perpendicular to the cross section or toward the longitudinal axis. So similarly, on the top fiber, you can also compute the strain, but that strain will be negative because the length shortened after the beam is subjected to bending, because length A prime B prime is less than AB. So it means that there will be the compressive strain on the other side of neutral axis. So here we just want to we have considered a differential area on the any cross section, and this differential area is having the quantity dA. You can say that the entire cross section is divided into 100 equal areas, and each area is having the magnitude dA. So as I told you that one side x-axis may be our neutral axis, and one side of neutral axis is subjected to maybe tensile stresses or tensile forces, and other side is subjected to maybe compressive stresses or compressive forces, or vice versa. So we can say that this element of the area is subjected to internal force dP. So dP is the resisting force which is acting perpendicular to the cross section or in the direction of longitudinal axis due to the applied bending moment, because there might be negative or positive strain on any side of the fiber. So this area is situated at a distance y from x-axis and at a distance x from y-axis, and c is the distance from the neutral axis to the extreme fiber. So we want to use the equilibrium equation. So first of all, we want to consider summation of all forces in z direction equal to 0. So this is the dP force is acting on this area. If we sum up the dP force acting on all area or over the entire area, so we can represent this expression into the integral form. So we want to compute the forces on entire area. So, or if we are summing up the forces on all area or all differential area existing on this cross section, then we may have total force. So this dP integral of the dP force over the entire area is equal to 0. This should be equal to 0 because to maintain the equilibrium. So there is no any applied force is acting, so we are having only one force. So this dP, we know that stress is equal to force per unit area. So this dP force can be computed multiplying this differential area with the stress. For example, we can assume that this cross section is subjected to a uniform stress value at any fiber or at any particular level. So divided by multiplying the differential area with the stress. And this stress value is equal to E over R into Y because we have already derived this parameter from here. So sigma will be equal to EY over R because we have already derived. So if we substitute the sigma value back here, then E over R we can take constant outside, and then we are having Y into dA integral. Actually, by this is the first moment of area, or this is the parameter that is used to determine the centroidal location with reference to the x-axis or y bar location. So actually, if we want to satisfy this equation, so this parameter should be equal to 0. It means that E over R value, actually these cannot be equal to 0 because E is the material property and R is the radius of curvature. So whenever a beam is subjected to bending, so it is always having some radius or curvature. So these values cannot be equal to 0. And similarly, the area of cross section cannot be equal to 0. So it means that the only possibility is that this equation may be equal to 0 if the y is equal to 0. So when the y will be equal to 0, so will be equal to 0 along the neutral axis. So that is the proof. That is proof is that this equation is only applicable along the neutral axis. So at the neutral axis, the total stress will be, or total force acting will be equal to 0. If we are situated at location other than neutral axis, we shall have definitely either compressive stresses or tensile stresses or compressive or tensile force. So that is also proof that the force is only 0 along neutral axis. Now similarly, we want to apply the summation of all moment about the y-axis, summation of moment produced about y-axis. So we want to compute the moment of this dp force about y-axis. If you want to compute the moment of this dp force about y-axis, so we need to multiply with the moment arm x. So dp force multiplied by its moment arm x, that is the moment produced by this force dp about y-axis. And if we are taking the integration with reference to with respect to area, then we will have total moment produced about y-axis. So there is no any external moment acting about y-axis. Why no external moment is acting about y-axis? Because we have not considered any applied load acting in or in the direction of x. We have only considered the load acting along y-axis. So expression means thus we are having an additional variable x. dp is equal to sigma into dA. Sigma value is replaced Ey over R. E over R is taken common outside, and this x will be multiplied with this y. So by definition, we are having, this is the definition of product moment of inertia. So product moment of inertia is represented as a IXY. So in product moment of area or product moment of inertia, we want to take the moment of area simultaneously about x-axis and y-axis, about both axes. So we need to multiply it with the x moment arm and moment arm in y direction. So again, to satisfy this equation, E over R value cannot be equal to 0. So only possibility is that the product moment of inertia should be equal to 0. So product moment of inertia will be equal to 0 either if we are having x is equal to 0 or y equal to 0. Actually, we will study this in detail. Product moment of inertia is always 0 for a symmetrical section. A symmetrical section is the one which is having at least one axis of symmetry. So definition means that this assumption is correct because moment about y-axis will be 0 because the load they are passing through the axis of symmetry. So product moment of inertia is always 0 about for a section which is having at least one axis of symmetry or plane of symmetry. That we will prove when we are solving certain questions. So the last part is that we want to take this mission of this force moment arm will be equal to y, and moment produced by this dp force about x-axis should be equal to this m. Why this m? Because this m is the applied bending moment, and this applied bending moment is produced by due to the forces F1, F2, and F3. So dp force momentum y, sigma is equal to Ey over r. E over r is taken constant, and y which is coming from sigma value when it is multiplied with this sigma, that will be this y value, that will become y square into dA. So actually this is the definition of second moment of area about x-axis or moment of inertia about x-axis. Second. So what is the moment of inertia about x-axis? If we want to take the moment of inertia or moment of area about x-axis, so we need to take the moment arm in y direction. And why it is called second moment of area? Because we are having as power 2 of y or second degree function of the y. So if we are replacing this parameter with ix, so this equation will be m over ix will be equal to E over r. So we can compare this equation number 5 with this equation number 2. So sigma z over y is equal to E over r. So after comparing equation number 2 and 3, we are having complete solution. So this equation is called flexure theory or simple bending theory or simple bending or flexure formula. So if we know the applied bending moment and we know the cross-section properties, we can compute the stress. Or if we know that how much radius or the curvature is produced by the bending moment. So we can ask determine the stresses by equating these two parameters. So simple bending theory applies takes place about an axis which is perpendicular to this focus axis. This x-axis is perpendicular to the plane of symmetry or axis of symmetry. Or you can say that simple bending theory applies if the load they are passing through the plane of symmetry or they are acting parallel to the plane of symmetry. So you can study the definition or remember by two ways, either by the load concept or moment concept. You can say that bending theory or the flexure formula is only applicable if the load they are passing through the plane of symmetry or acting parallel to the plane of symmetry. Both are true. Or if you want to study with reference to moment, so if the load they are acting parallel to or passing through the plane of symmetry, so the load they will produce the moment about the axis which is perpendicular to the plane of symmetry. That symmetry which are perpendicular to the plane of symmetry or axis of symmetry. Because if the load they are acting parallel to the plane of symmetry, so they are producing the moment about the axis which is perpendicular to the plane of symmetry. This means that if the moment is not acting about this axis which is perpendicular to the plane of symmetry, then we cannot use this formula to compute the bending stress. Then what procedure we need to adopt, we will study in this topic. So actually, this is also referred as a uniaxial bending, because if the moment are acting about the axis which is perpendicular to the axis of symmetry, then this beam will only bend in one direction, only in vertical direction. Deflection will take place only in one direction. The not acting parallel to the axis of symmetry, or the moment they are not acting perpendicular to the plane of symmetry, then this beam will bend axis when it means that it has a biaxial bending or unsymmetrical bending. So if the beam is bending simultaneously about both axes, then we cannot use this formula to compute the resultant stresses. Then what procedure we need to adopt, that we are going to study in our unsymmetrical bending topic. The axis drawn through and another mutually perpendicular to it through the centroid, then these axes are called the principal axis. So now definition is becoming a little bit complicated, but I would like to make it simple. Actually, he says that if the plane of symmetry or axis of symmetry, it is passing through the centroid, then we refer this axis as a principal axis. So we have given a specific name to this axis. So if the plane of symmetry or the axis of symmetry, if it is passing through the centroid, this is called the principal axis. If we know the location of one principal axis, then the second principal axis will be perpendicular to this first principal axis and also passing through the centroid. This means that both this x-axis and y-axis, which are passing through the centroid, they will be the principal axis. Now we will further refine the definition of symmetrical bending. So symmetrical bending is the bending if the load they are passing through the principal axis or acting parallel to the principal axis. It is not necessary for the load to pass through the principal axis. They may be parallel. Or a simple definition is the moment they are acting about the principal axis. Because if this axis is the principal axis, then this x-axis, which is perpendicular to this y-axis, will also be the principal axis because it is passing through the centroid. If the moment they are acting about principal axis. So if such an axis means if axis of symmetry is drawn through the centroid. So let me make it simple. If axis of symmetry is drawn through the centroid and another which is perpendicular to this axis through the centroid, then these axes are called principal axes. The planes that are parallel to the principal axis and pass through the shear center are called the principal plane of bending. So this definition is intricate at the moment, and this will be referred as a principal axis. And the second principal axis will be perpendicular to this one. So a simple bending theory applies when the moment they are acting about the principal axis. Okay, now here we would like to study what is the axis of symmetry. So axis of symmetry divides this section in such a fashion or such a way that one part is exactly the mirror image of the other part. So first of all, you need to establish the centroid. So these are the centroidal axes, X and Y. If you want to discuss this vertical axis, so this vertical axis is also the axis of symmetry, because about this axis, the right side is exactly the mirror image of this left portion. It means that if you are folding this section about this y-axis, so the right side will exactly overlap with the left side. So this y-axis is the axis of symmetry. Similarly, if you want to fold this section about x-axis, so the bottom part will exactly overlap with the top part. Or you can say that the top part is the mirror image of the bottom. So both x and y axis are the axis of symmetry. Similarly, this I section, it is also having both x axis and y axis as the axis of symmetry. This T section, it is centroidal location is here. It is symmetrical about y axis because right side is the mirror image of the left side, but it is not symmetrical about x axis because bottom part is not the mirror image of the top part. And similarly, we are having angle section and Z section, and both these sections, these are not symmetrical section, or these are unsymmetrical section. So here, if you see that y-axis, you will see that the right side is not the mirror image of left side, and also in the same way, the bottom side is not the mirror image of top part. And the same is applicable for this angle section. So now the definition of symmetrical section. Section which is having at least one axis of symmetry is regarded as a symmetrical section. So it is not necessary for a symmetrical section to have both centroidal axis as a symmetrical axis. If a section is having at least one axis of symmetry, then this will be regarded as a symmetrical section. So it means that all these three sections, hollow rectangular, I section and T section, all will be regarded as a symmetrical section, regardless that this T section is only having one axis of symmetry. So condition is that if it is having at least one axis of symmetry, then the section will be regarded as a symmetrical section. But for unsymmetrical section, so if the section is not having any axis of symmetry, then this section will be regarded as a unsymmetrical section. The section which are not having any axis of symmetry are called the unsymmetrical section. With Dr. Qasim. So similarly, we are also having the principal axis. So actually, these are the axes about which the product moment of area is 0, and second moment of area Ix and Iy, they are either having their minimum and maximum values. So about the principal axis, So second moment of areas or moment of inertia about Ix and Iy. So one of it will have its maximum value and other will have its minimum. So if Ix is having the maximum value, then Iy will be having minimum. So if Iy is maximum, then Ix may be minimum. And the product moment of inertia will be 0. So they are different from the principal plane. So principal plane is the two-dimensional surface which is related with the stress. And principal axis, these are the one-dimensional lines which are related with the moment of inertia. So principal planes are the planes about which the shear stresses are 0 and the normal stresses are minimum and maximum. And principal axes are the axis, these are the line in the cross section about which the product moment of inertia is 0 and second moment of area is having either maximum and minimum value. Okay, next is that how we can determine the principal axis. So these are some salient feature of principal axis. A plane of symmetry in a section will automatically will become the principal plane or principal axis. It means that if in a section any axis of symmetry exists which is passing through the centroid, then this axis of symmetry which is passing through the centroid will be the principal axis. It means that in case of I section and this rectangular section, both x-axis and y-axis, these will be the principal axis because these are the axes of symmetry and these are also passing to the centroid. So a plane section, whether they have an axis of symmetry or not, have two perpendicular axes about which the product moment of area is 0. Okay, here. First, let me elaborate this. This is a singly symmetric section. So you can say that this y-central axis, this is the axis of symmetry. So this will be the principal axis. Because if the axis of symmetry is passing through the centroid, that will become the principal axis. So if we know the orientation of first principal axis, then the second principal axis would be perpendicular to this one. So it means that the x-axis, centroidal x-axis, although it is not the axis of symmetry, will become the principal axis because it is perpendicular to the first principal axis or the axis of symmetry. So it means that for a symmetrical section means which is having at least one axis of symmetry, the centroidal axis they become automatically the principal axis. So it means that in case of angle section and Z section, the centroidal axis, these are not the principal axis. It means that the product moment of inertia or the product moment of area will not be 0 about the centroidal axis. So by definition, it says that all type of this section, whether they are symmetrical or unsymmetrical, they are having a set of reference axes which about which the product moment of area will be equal to 0, or they are having the principal axis. So product moment of area is always 0 about the principal axis. So in case of unsymmetrical section, principal axis will be this, which are marked by this red line, that line. So these principal axes, they are having different orientation with reference to centroidal axis. So we need to determine the orientation of this principal axis. It means that even though the load is acting in gravity direction, but this axis is not the principal axis. So it means that that section will bend about both x-axis and y-axis. So all type of this section, whether they are symmetrical or unsymmetrical, they are having a set of reference axis about which the product moment of inertia is 0, or which are called principal axis. So in case of symmetrical section, centroidal axis are the principal axis, but in case of unsymmetrical section, centroidal axis and principal axis, they are having different orientation. So in case of symmetrical section, orientation of principal axis is readily known or available or given, but orientation of principal axis is unknown for unsymmetrical section, and that we will learn that how we can determine. So a simple banding or uniaxial banding or symmetrical banding is the banding which takes place about principal axis. So simple definition is that if the moment they are acting about the principal axis, then the banding will be referred as a simple banding or symmetrical banding. And the Flecher formula that we have just derived can be applicable. So this formula is only applicable if the moment they are acting about the principal axis. If the moment they are not acting about the principal axis, then the banding will be unsymmetrical or biaxial. So we cannot directly use the Flecher formula. So what does it mean? Banding which takes place about the principal axis mean moment is applied about the principal axis or load is applied parallel to the axis of load. Load is acting perpendicular to the axis. Okay, I will make it more simple. So if the moment is applied about the principal axis, about or parallel to the axis, or load are acting perpendicular to the axis. If the moment is applied about principal axis. Or load is acting perpendicular to that axis, which are perpendicular to the moment axis. Mainly, unsymmetrical banding occurs if moments or loading are not applied about the principal axis. So in case of symmetric section, principal axis always coincide with the central axis. But for the unsymmetrical section, we need to determine the orientation of principal axis. Now the definition of symmetrical banding. If the loading is perpendicular to the one of the principal axis, the banding will be only the direction will be produced only in the direction of loading. Such banding is called symmetrical banding. So again, if the load is perpendicular or parallel to one of the principal, if the load are acting, okay, doesn't matter, because if the load they are acting parallel to the principal axis, they will produce the moment about the second principal axis, which is perpendicular to the first principal axis. So simple, I want to say that if the moment they are acting about the principal axis, or if the load they are acting parallel to the principal axis, then the banding will be symmetrical banding. For a symmetrical section to have symmetrical banding, the plane of loading must be parallel or contain a central axis which is also a central axis. So for symmetrical section to have symmetrical banding, load must either be passing through the axis of symmetry or it must be acting parallel to the axis of symmetry. What does it mean? That it is not necessary for applied load to pass through the axis of symmetry. It may be parallel to the axis of symmetry, because the load which is passing through the axis of symmetry or parallel to the axis of symmetry, both will have the same moment about this x-axis, which is perpendicular to the load direction. So unsymmetrical section may also be subjected to symmetrical banding if plane of loading contains the principal axis. Actually, in case of simple banding, the axis about which the moment is produced becomes the neutral axis. If the load they are acting in y direction, they will produce a moment about x-axis, and x-axis will become neutral axis, and one side of the neutral axis will be in tension, and other side will be in compression, or vice versa. Similarly here, if the load is acting along y-axis, they will produce the moment about the x-axis, then the x-axis will become the neutral axis, and one side of the neutral axis will be in tension and other side will be in compression. In case of the angle section and Z section, so orientation of neutral axis is different. So in that case, if the load they are acting along this y principal axis, they will produce a moment about this x principal axis. So this will become the neutral axis, and one side will be completely in tension and other will be in compression, or vice versa. So same is applicable for here. So a behavior wise, the Z section is the best section to be used as a problem you have already discussed in state structure. Why? First we need to discuss unsymmetrical bending occur if the load is not acting parallel or along one of the principal axis. Simple. Bending takes place out of the plane of the loading and as well in plane. It means that the bending will take place in the load direction and also in the perpendicular to the load direction, which is the biaxial bending. Unsymmetrical bending takes place both in symmetric and unsymmetric section. So unsymmetrical section may occur both in symmetrical section and also in unsymmetrical section. So we will discuss both cases step by step. So first we will discuss the unsymmetrical bending in symmetrical section and then unsymmetrical bending in unsymmetrical section. So unsymmetrical means biaxial. Since loads are normally applied along or parallel to the centroidal axis, so unsymmetrical bending is evident in unsymmetrical section whose principal axis do not coincide with the principal axis. So what it says that, so normally actually we apply the load in gravity direction. For example, if we are having this Z section, in Z section, Y and X, these are the centroidal axis, which are not a principal axis actually in this case. And X bar and Y bar, these are the principal axis which are having orientation alpha with reference to centroidal axis. So normally we apply the load in gravity direction or about the or along the centroidal axis. Although this load is acting along y centroidal axis, but this load is not passing through or acting parallel to any one of the principal axis. So it means that this section will undergo biaxial bending or unsymmetrical. So this section, when we apply the load, it will bend or deflect in x direction and also in the y direction at the same time. So unsymmetrical bending will only occur if the load is acting either along this y bar axis, which is principal axis, or x axis. So actually, we provide the purlin on inclined roofing system or the truss. So if we know the orientation of the principal axis, so whatever is the orientation of the principal axis, if we are keeping the inclination of the truss or the top surface same as of the principal orientation of principal axis, so it means that if this angle is equal to this one, so when we are placing on the inclined surface, so the principal plane, it coincides with the gravity direction. So now the load is acting. So this is not the case. Now the load is acting along the principal axis. So in case of the principal axis, there will be only uniaxial bending. Bending takes place about x-axis, because if the load is acting in y direction, then the load is acting about x-axis. So this beam will bend in downward direction. So we will have symmetrical bending. So if the beam is bending only about one axis, but on the other hand, if a beam is subjected to it is bending about both x and y axis, so it is subjected to higher stress value, and we will learn when we are computing the stress in case of unsymmetrical bending. So inclination of the roof is kept equal to the orientation of the principal axis from the plane of the loading to produce the symmetrical bending. So then how we can resolve this bending? For example, if we are having this case, so we can resolve this load if the load, actually unsymmetrical bending will occur if the load is not acting about the or acting parallel to the principal axis. In such case, we need to resolve this load into two components. Each of the component is acting along one of the principal axis. And this method is called the principle of superposition method. So in unsymmetrical bending, in symmetrical section, unsymmetrical bending occurs when load is acting at an inclination to the axis of symmetry. So in unsymmetrical loading, the neutral axis of the cross section does not coincide with the axis of loading. So what we do? First, we determine the inclination of the load with reference to principal axis. We resolve the load into two components. So each of the component is acting along one of the principal axis, and then the load which is acting along x y principal axis will produce the mode about the x principal axis, and the component of the load which is acting along the x principal axis will produce the moment about y principal axis. And then we compute the stresses separately due to the moment acting about the x principal axis, and we compute the stress separately due to the moment which is acting about the y principal axis. And the total stress can be computed by adding up the both stress components, and which is referred as the principle of superposition. So I will stop here. So next time when we start a lecture, so I will start my lecture from here. I will explain this procedure again, and then we will study that how we can use this procedure of principle of superposition to solve the problem related with the unsymmetrical bending. So I have downloading attendance, and attendance has already been marked. CR has already noted down the roll number of the students which were absent. So inshallah, I will see you tomorrow, and I will also take the question tomorrow, inshallah. So till then, Allah Hafiz.